Culture. Culture, religion, ethnicity. Yeah. Culture, religion, and ethnicity. Religions look different inside of different ethnicities and different cultures, right? Right. Black Christianity doesn't look like white Christianity. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that black Christianity does not look like white Christianity, right? And you got different types of Muslims. You got Arab Muslim doesn't really look like the Nation of Islam Muslim, and Sub-Saharan Muslim looks different than North African Muslim. It looks different. They come together at big celebrations when they go around the Kaaba and all that stuff. When they take their Hajj, their whatever it's called, um, their journey. Um, they all meet up there and they discuss the different variations and the common grounds. But the common grounds hold them together more so than the cultural, ethnic differences, right? Okay, remember, black and white Christians look nothing alike. So you have variations of Muslims too, according to the culture, right? Okay, so within Rasta, and I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of this myself. This is me evolving and growing, right? Nothing is uniform. Nothing is uniform. I'll give you that. Ethnicity and culture will bring variations of a ideology and a concept, and that's okay. That's just natural. That's not a bad thing, even though it causes rifts and debates within said culture. You know, because some will say Rastafari is not a religion, it's a tradition and a way of life, right? But tradition and a way of life would look uniform because everybody will be living that tradition and way of life. But it's not, it's an ideology, you know? So I think a lot of times in Rasta we say things that's not really fitting, and it'll put us in a box, in a cookie cut situation, but that's not something that Rasta can do. That's why it comes across looking like, so many ones don't know what they're talking about, and it's like it's unorganized and all these things. They say you talk to 40 different Rasta, you get 40 different answers, but they all end with saying Rastafari. It's a joke. Um, I mean that's a joke, not it's a joke, not the movement. So the movement has certain principles, right? The movement has certain ideals that come with it, but even that vary amongst the houses and the groups, right? Facts amongst the mansions. Even the ideology varies amongst the mansions, and groups and sects and individuals. So when it comes to culture, when it comes to this culture thing, your culture, your way of life and your tradition is an experience that's passed down, right? But now, when people pick, so now, if a way of life and a tradition is passed down and taught, can you claim a tradition and a way of life if it wasn't passed down to you? So does that mean that a lot of people who are saying they're Rastas are just copycats and clones and wannabes and dare I say cultural appropriators? You know what I'm saying? I say that because if Rastas say it's a way of life, it's a tradition. Tradition is not something that you adopt. A tradition is something that's passed down to you. So what was it passed down to? To you? Who passed it down to you, or did you just pick it up through music? You know what I mean? So and if it is, and if you do pick it up, you know what I mean? Will it not vary according to the tradition that you grew up in, or do you just take on another person's tradition? Because what is a tradition? Tradition is something that's carried on and passed down. So if it was never done in your lineage before you, then you're adopting it. So you're adopting another person's culture. You're adopting what another person is passing down, right? Okay. How does that look? These are just questions that I think people should ask themselves. Because if that's the case, then you really can't tell a person what it's supposed to look like in a sense, because is it not going to look like the experience that they had where they're from? Um, the Rasta in Jamaica is going to have a different experience than the Rasta in Zimbabwe, or the Rasta in London, and the Rasta in New York. So these different experiences won't they create different traditions? How do you pass down a Caribbean tradition to a person that lives in London? You know, a person that lives in brick and mortar, how do you pass down a tradition that deals with nature? So what does that mean? That they just pretend to go into nature, because they have to go into a carved out man-made park and pretend that they're in nature. It's nature, but it ain't the same as the ones who really go up in the hills, and they talk about certain things. I talked about these things in the past, but it just comes up again because somebody was speaking to me about traditions, what I mean, and ethnicity and culture, and I'm like, these things are different, and your experience is your tradition in a sense, right? The things you experience that are known to you as a people. You know what I'm saying? As a people, there are certain experiences that you've experienced as a ethnicity, as a nation, as a culture, as a people. That are different from other ethnicities and cultures of people. So how do you incorporate another person's experience and call it your tradition? Just things to think about. You know me. That's it.